I want you to think of the strongest person you know. Who came to mind? And more importantly, why did you choose them? Maybe they're physically strong, maybe they've been through something incredibly difficult and somehow kept going, or maybe they're the person who stays calm when everything around them seems to be falling apart. Whatever your answer is, hold on to it for a little while. This week, we're going to spend some time questioning what we actually mean when we call someone strong. My name's Zach, and I'm the Rune Realist. Welcome to week 2 of 24 weeks with the Elder Futhark, Living the Runes. Last week, we spent some time with Fehu and asked ourselves what it actually means to be wealthy. If you gave Fehu its full 7 days, I'd love to hear what you discovered. Head back to that video and leave your experience in the comments, because those reflections are going to become part of this journey for everyone who comes after us. And if you're finding this series months or even years after I recorded it, don't worry about catching up. There is no catching up. Take the runes 1 week at a time. This is your week 2. This week we're living with Uruz. So this is Uruz. It's the second rune of the Elder Futhark, and the reconstructed Proto-Germanic name is generally understood to refer to the aurochs. If you've never heard of an aurochs before, imagine a wild ancestor of modern cattle, except considerably more intimidating. These were huge animals. They lived wild across Europe for thousands of years, and unlike the domesticated cattle we talked about with Fehu, these weren't animals you casually kept behind the house. And I love that transition between the first 2 runes. Fehu gives us the image of domesticated cattle, wealth that can be owned, managed, exchanged, and cared for. Then immediately afterwards, Uruz gives us something wild, something powerful, something you don't completely control. That distinction gives us a really interesting place to begin thinking about Uruz. Now this is where Uruz gets a little messy. And personally, I like messy, because when we're dealing with something this old, the evidence doesn't always fit into nice, clean definitions we find in modern rune guides. Remember, we have 3 poems that we're using throughout this series. The Anglo-Saxon rune poem gives us the image we probably expect. Its describes the aurochs as a proud, horned animal. It's fierce, it's powerful, it roams across the moors and fights with its horns. That's a pretty easy connection to the modern idea of Uruz representing strength. But then we look at the Norwegian and Icelandic rune poems, and things change. The corresponding in those traditions isn't describing an aurochs at all. It's generally interpreted in connection with slag or dross from ironworking. So now we've got a problem. If I wanted to give you the easiest version of Uruz, I could simply say, Uruz means aurochs. The aurochs was strong, therefore Uruz means strength. And we'd be done. But we'd also be ignoring part of the historical picture. Language changes. Rune names change. Cultures change. And these poems were written centuries apart in different places. So rather than pretending all of our sources say exactly the same thing, I think it's much more important to acknowledge the differences and ask what we can actually learn from them. That's part of what studying the runes looks like. Sometimes we get answers. Sometimes we get more questions. Let's go back to the aurochs for a minute. Imagine encountering one of these animals in the wild. It doesn't need anyone's permission to be powerful. It doesn't need to prove anything. Its strength is simply part of what it is. And I think that's where Uruz starts getting interesting for us today. Because when we talk about strength, we often think about something visible. We think about the person who can endure the most, work the hardest, or push through whatever gets put in front of them. But is that always strength? Think about the person you chose at the beginning of this video. What actually made them strong? Was it what they could endure? Was it what they could change? Was it knowing when to fight for something? Or maybe knowing when something wasn't worth fighting for anymore? That's the question I want us to start exploring. And that brings us to this week's Rune Realist moment. One of the modern interpretations you'll see attached to Uruz over and over again is strength. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I just think we need to decide what we mean by it. Because be strong can become terrible advice surprisingly quickly. Sometimes strength means pushing yourself. Sometimes strength means admitting that you've reached your limit. There are situations where strength means standing your ground, and others where it means having enough confidence to change your mind. So I don't want us to spend this week trying to become tougher. I want us to become more aware of how we use the strength we already have, and maybe even notice where we've been mistaking stubbornness for strength. I know I've done that before. Maybe you have too. So let's make this personal. Where does strength show up in your life right now? Don't immediately go looking for some enormous struggle. It might be something completely ordinary. Maybe you've been putting off a conversation because you know it's going to be uncomfortable. Maybe there's something you've started that you've been struggling to finish. Or maybe there's an area of your life where you've been trying to handle everything yourself, even though you know you could use some help. Whatever came to mind, pay attention to it. Because that might be where Uruz has something useful for you this week. Strength doesn't always announce itself. A lot of the time, nobody else even sees it. Which brings us back to the question I want you to carry through this episode. What does strength look like when no one is watching? For the next 7 days, I want you to carry Uruz with you. Use your rune set if you have one, draw it on a piece of paper if you don't, put it somewhere you'll encounter it naturally throughout your day. And every time you notice it, ask yourself, what would strength look like here? Don't assume you already know the answer. That's important. Maybe strength means take action. Maybe it means be patient. Maybe it means speaking up. Maybe it means listening. The point isn't to make yourself behave a certain way because a rune told you to. The point is to interrupt your natural reaction long enough to ask yourself a better question. Then see what happens. For Fehu, we practice generosity. This week, I want you to choose one thing you've been avoiding because it's difficult. Keep this reasonable. We're not trying to manufacture some enormous life-changing moment just because it's Uruz week. I'm talking about the thing that's been sitting in the back of your mind. The phone call you keep saying you'll make tomorrow. The task you've been avoiding. The conversation you know needs to happen. Whatever your version of that is, choose one, then do it. And afterwards, don't just ask yourself whether it went well. Ask yourself what actually made it difficult in the first place. Were you afraid of failing? Were you afraid of someone's reaction? Did you simply not want to be uncomfortable? That's where the reflection begins. Because sometimes we don't discover our strength by succeeding. Sometimes we discover it by finding out that we can tolerate discomfort and keep moving anyway. If you're keeping a journal throughout these 24 weeks, I want you to keep this week's reflection pretty simple. Start with, where in my life am I stronger than I give myself credit for? Spend some time with that. Then when you're ready, ask yourself a slightly more uncomfortable question. Where am I trying to look strong instead of actually being strong? I think that second question might take a little longer. And that's okay. You've got a week. For me, Uruz raises an uncomfortable question about control. I like being able to solve things. I like knowing what I'm doing. And when something isn't working, my instinct can be to push harder until it does. But sometimes pushing harder doesn't actually solve anything. Sometimes the stronger response is adapting. Sometimes it's asking for help. Sometimes it's admitting that the approach I'm using simply isn't working. And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about the image of the aurochs. It's powerful because of what it is. It doesn't need to perform strength for anybody. There's something about that idea I want to carry with me this week. Maybe you will too. So now we've learned a little about Uruz. We've questioned what we mean when we associate it with strength. Now comes the part that actually matters. Live with it. Give Uruz 7 days. Carry the rune. Ask yourself what strength looks like in the situations you encounter. Do the difficult thing you've been avoiding. And pay attention to what you learn about yourself in the process. Then come back here. I want to know whether your definition of strength changed. Maybe Uruz showed you somewhere you're stronger than you realized. Maybe it showed you somewhere you've been forcing something that needs a different approach. Or maybe your experience leads you to interpret this rune completely differently than I do. Tell me about it. That's what this series is for. We're not trying to arrive at 24 identical answers. We're spending 24 weeks asking better questions. And when your 7 days with Uruz are finished, we'll move on to Thorasaks. I'll be there when you're ready. If you're enjoying this journey and you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you with us for the rest of the Elder Futhark. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll know when each new episode is ready. But for now, don't worry about the next rune. You've got Uruz, and you've got one question to spend the week answering. What does strength look like when no one is watching? Learn the rune, question the rune, live the rune, and I'll see you when you're ready for week 3.